Welcome to 2nd edition Wargaming, I'm Rob, and in this video we're going to cover the movement phase of Warhammer 40k 2nd edition. In this video I'm going to cover vehicle and infantry movement and also a few special types of movement such as jump packs and flying, models that can leap and charging from vehicles. Okay, so let's break down the movement phase into its 4 sub-phases, which are declare charges, compulsory moves, move charges, and the 4th, remaining moves. Now it's important to adhere to this order and we'll see why later. Okay, so there's a few common rules to all types of movement, and they are: a model may move up to its movement allowance as listed in its stats in inches in any direction. They may turn to face in any direction, and turning alone does not count as movement. The model does not have to move its full allowance or move at all if under the player's control. Also, a model may not normally move within 1 inch of an enemy model unless they are charging. Note the word normally, as there are exceptions. So the first movement subphase, declare charges. At the beginning of your turn, you must nominate which units are going to charge, although you don't have to nominate which units that they are charging into. You may declare charges against enemy models that your models cannot see, including hidden enemy models. You may declare charges against enemy models in buildings, but with certain caveats that I'll cover later. Also, as a side note, any units that are going on Overwatch would be declared at this stage as well. Subphase 2, compulsory moves. Now this covers models that the player has no control over, such as out of control vehicles or models moving randomly due to the effect of certain weapons or psychic powers. I also include moving broken troops in this category. Models may inadvertently move into hand-to-hand combat during the compulsory moves, but do not receive the charge bonus. Subphase 3, move charges. Units that have declared a charge may now charge. Nominate the unit that is charging, then nominate the unit you wish to charge. Remember, pre-measuring is not allowed. Charging models may double their movement rate, move 1 by 1, and must engage the closest enemy model unless it is already engaged in hand-to-hand combat. Even if the enemy model is a vehicle or something that the charging model has no chance of destroying. A charging model is slowed by terrain as normal, but may move around hazards and obstacles as long as it tries to engage the model that was closest when the charge was declared. Models that have charged may not shoot in the shooting phase, even if they fail to make contact with the enemy. If charging models in a building, then the charger will halt at the door or window and fight the occupants there, counting as fighting over an obstacle for the turn that they charged. If charging models are inside the building along with enemy models, they charge as normal. Subphase 4, remaining moves. Now every model that wasn't a charge or compulsory move can move up to its movement allowance. A unit may choose to run, which will double its movement characteristic, so long as there are no enemy units within 8 inches of that unit. Should a running unit come within 8 inches of an enemy unit, it will halt immediately at that point. A whole unit must run or not at all, and if it runs it may not shoot or throw grenades in the shooting phase. Charging, running and normal movement are all subject to terrain and obstacle modifiers, and the 4 types of terrain are: open ground. This can include sparse bushes or woods, hills, ruins and stairs. There are no movement penalties for negotiating this terrain. Difficult terrain. Dense forests, steep slopes, shallow waters, bogs or marshes, and ladders. These must be traversed at half movement rate. Very difficult terrain. Sheer slopes, fast flowing water, tar pits. These must be crossed at quarter movement rate. And lastly, impassable terrain. Cliffs, high walls, very deep water. As the name suggests, models cannot normally traverse this type of terrain. Obstacles are things like fences, walls, barricades, trenches or hedges. If an obstacle is 1 inch or less in height and or breadth, then it may be crossed without penalty. If it is over 1 inch but not over twice the model's height, then it may be crossed at half movement penalty. If an obstacle is over twice the model's height, then it cannot be crossed. A model that does not have sufficient movement to cross an obstacle must halt in front of it and not balance on top. Squads may be split over an obstacle as long as unit coherency is maintained. The best way to avoid confusion during the game is to agree on what types of terrain and cover are present and the modifiers and benefits for those types of terrain before army deployment. The last bit to mention before we move on to some specific clarifications to the rules we've just mentioned is hiding. Models that didn't run or charge may go into hiding at the end of the movement phase. I'm not going to cover it in this video, but just be aware that it would happen at the very end of the movement phase. Right, next up, clarification for specific equipment or abilities. First up, jump packs, as they're pretty common on the battlefield. If a jump pack is used, then it replaces the model's normal movement rate that's in their characteristics. If a normal jump is carried out, then once scatter and any potential hits have been worked out, the model may then fire any non-move or fire weapon or throw a grenade in the shooting phase. If the jump is a charge, then scatter and potential hits are worked out as before. But then there is a 4-inch movement after scatter in order to allow the model to engage with its intended target. You may not use jump packs from a vehicle, but you may disembark and then jump in the same turn. And remember that disembarking and then jumping would be carried out in the remaining moves sub-phase of the movement phase, so charging at this time would not be possible. Next up, flying. The two units capable of flying to the extent that different rules are used are swooping hawks and gargoyles. Some demons or greater demons have the ability to fly, but they use the normal jump pack rules to represent this. Although swooping hawks and gargoyles have differences to the way they can both fly high, which removes them from the battlefield to return in a later turn. They can both disengage from hand-to-hand combat without penalty by flying high, and they can both charge into hand-to-hand combat by flying normally or from dropping down from flying high. When charging from flying high, the model they choose becomes the closest unengaged model. The last movement oddity I'm going to cover here is the leap or bounding type of movement. Hormagaunts, Flamers of Tzeentch and Eldar Exarchs with the leap ability may leap or bound. In the case of the Hormagaunt and Exarch, then the leap is added to the model's movement or can be used at some point during its movement. Whereas with the case of the Flamer, its entire movement counts as bounding. As well as conferring other bonuses, this movement normally allows the model, whilst leaping, to clear the height of another model or obstacle without penalty. The important thing to note here is you must still engage the closest unengaged enemy when charging. You cannot leap over a model to engage a model behind it. The only model I know that can ignore the closest unengaged enemy when charging is the Fleshhound due to its blood scent ability. If anyone knows of any others, please put them in the comments below. Now there are other oddities to movement such as Discs of Tzeentch, Warp Spider jump generators, Warp Jump War Gear card and more besides, but I think the three we've mentioned will do for now. Right, on to vehicle movement. Vehicles move at the same time as other models. They start the game either stationary or at slow speed, and there are 3 different speeds: slow, combat and fast. The distance in inches that each speed covers is specific to the vehicle type and will be stated on their data facts. Most vehicles, apart from maintaining their speed, can accelerate or decelerate 1 speed band per turn. The faster a vehicle goes, the fewer turns it can perform. 1 45-degree turn at fast speed, 2 45-degree turns at combat speed, which may be combined into a single 90-degree turn, and as many turns as you like at slow speed. The supplied turning template can be used if required. Vehicles with a movement characteristic, normally walkers, run and charge like normal infantry. They get a free 90-degree turn at the beginning and at the end of their movement, with each additional 90-degree turn costing 1 inch of their movement. Bikes may accelerate up to 2 speed bands in a turn, but may still only decelerate 1 speed band per turn. Bikes are subjected to the same turning limitations as other vehicles, but they may perform an unlimited amount of skid turns using the chart provided. A D6 is rolled and the relevant column consulted. There are 5 motive types that vehicles fall under: tracked, wheeled, bikes, walkers and skimmers. The motive type dictates how the vehicle will perform over certain terrain and obstacles. In addition, tracked vehicles moving through a bog will get stuck on a D6 roll of 6. Walkers may fit into buildings providing the model actually fits. Skimmers are the most versatile motive type, being able to traverse terrain and obstacles without penalty and being able to hover on the spot. They may also land if going at slow speed, but will crash if going any faster. They must also hover or land for troops to mount or dismount. Which brings us nicely onto boarding and leaving vehicles. Models leaving a vehicle may leap out at any time, interrupting the vehicle's movement if necessary. The models are placed at the sides and rear of the vehicle and may move as normal, but may not charge. Models may board a vehicle that moved slow in its previous turn if they are within 2 inches of its side or rear at the end of their movement. The vehicle can then carry out its move. Crew may disembark from the vehicle, but must remain within 6 inches of it unless it is destroyed. If a model embarks or disembarks from a vehicle that is moving 10 inches or less, then there is no risk. If the vehicle is moving over 10, then there is an automatic hit, as per the table. Okay, so this bit refers to my previous remark about the importance of sticking to the movement subphases, because charges must come before remaining moves. So models wishing to charge out of a vehicle may do so, but they must charge in the move charges subphase before the vehicle gets to carry out its normal move. Now, this concept is supported and contradicted in the FAQ, but with only one supporting answer saying that vehicles can move as part of a unit's charge move. And although I do love the idea, it does seem to contradict what's in the main rules with regards to the order of movement. So I'm going to say that moving vehicles as part of a charge move is probably incorrect. But that being said, if both players can agree how charging from vehicles works beforehand, then go with what works for you. And lastly, for vehicles, out of control. Normally, only vehicles that moved in their previous turn can go out of control, although there is some FAQ that states that a vehicle can go out of control from stationary. Again, it's one of those contradictions that you'll have to settle on an answer with your opponent. And as previously stated, vehicles that continue to go out of control are moved in the compulsory movement subphase. All vehicles, no matter what their motive type, move 3d6 in distance, with a d6 deciding the direction. Skimmers gain an additional d6 roll to see if there's any change in altitude. Phew, okay, well that's that done. And as usual, what we'll do now is go to the tabletop and I'll run through some of the points that I've gone over here. Okay, so what we've got here is a few models set up. I'm going to try and take us through probably the most common movements that could take place in a normal turn with sort of normal troops, no sort of specialist troops here or vehicles. So we'll say this ground is open ground, so there's no difficult terrain, it's just your normal movement characteristic, no penalties. So as we know from earlier, the movement phase has 4 subphases. declare charges, compulsory moves, move charges, and remaining moves. So what we'll do now is pick a few units to do these different things. So for the Orc Warbike, we're saying it's out of control due to damage or psychic power from the previous turn, something like that. This Orc here we'll say is broken, and the other models are fine for now. So the first part of the movement phase is declare charges. So what we're going to do is pick this sergeant model here, and we're going to say he's declaring a charge. Now you don't have to declare the unit you're going to charge, but normally it's pretty obvious. So then after we've declared charges, we go on to compulsory moves. Now that's where we would do out of control vehicles. I like to also do broken troops. I'm not sure if it's actually in the rules. I can't remember finding it, but I always like to put broken troops into compulsory moves, and also troops maybe suffering from psychological conditions like frenzy, they would be moved in the compulsory movement phase. So let's do that now. The bike would go 3d6 out of control, 5, 10, 11 inches. And it's a 1 and 2 left, 3 and 4 straight ahead, and 5 or 6 to the right. Okay, so it's going left, so the bike's left. That's when we could use the turn template just to designate that. And you put that alongside, and then you move. Oh, no, that's the bike's right. Yeah, the bike's left would be this way. And that would then move 11 inches in that direction, bringing it off the table very nearly out of control. Now, depending on the effects on the bike, it may gain control, or it may not, depending on what's affected it. Now, the broken orc, he would move away from the enemy towards cover 2d6. Okay, 8 inches. Let's say over towards here. Okay, so that would be the compulsory movement phase done with the troops that we have here. So we've declared a charge, we've made compulsory moves, now we'd move charges. So this Space Marine here is going to double his movement rate from 4 to 8 to charge this orc, and he's in range. Done. So now we've declared charges, we've done compulsory moves here, we've moved charges. That leaves remaining moves. So let's just say, for instance, this Space Marine here is just going to go running after that orc or running after the bike, one or the other. It would double its move from 4 to 8. And we'll put a run token next to that just to remind us in case we try and shoot in the shooting phase. So that just really leaves us our last Marine over here, and he's not declared a charge or charge, and he's not run, so that he can go into hiding at the end of this turn if he finds himself in cover which blocks line of sight from the enemy. So he's going to use a normal 4-inch move behind these crates here. We'll put a hidden token there, and that's him hidden for the purposes of targeting. So that's pretty much it. The only other addition I'd say, we'll take this running Marine here, is obstacles. Let's say that's there. Our Marine's here. He wants to get on the other side of this. Now, because it's over 1 inch in height, but not twice as high as the Marine, just measure that one there. 2 Marines are higher than the obstacle. He can get over that at half movement rate. So he can still run, but he's only going to travel 4 inches, and that would just get him to the other side in one move. Now, if this obstacle was taller than that, say that tall, and there's a Marine there, we'll use the other one. So it's over 1 inch, and it's twice as tall, over twice as tall as the Marine. That's impassable to the Marine. He can't get over that. So he'd have to go around, find another way. Okay, so that pretty much covers a general movement phase in a normal game. Now we're going to move on to maybe jump packs, swooping hawks, things like that. Okay, so on to jump packs. We've got 2 Seraphim sisters here, and we've got 2 orc opponents here, and I've backed them into this hard cover to show what might happen if a jump pack deviates into sort of a hard terrain like that. So there's two ways obviously you can move with the jump pack. Is you could jump to engage in hand-to-hand combat, but that'd be part of a charge and would have to take place in the move charges phase. But if you wanted to just move closer to shoot, then this is how you would do it. You don't have to move the total 18 inches of a jump pack. So let's just say the sisters opt for 11 inches to get closer into close range for their bolt pistols. So we'll place one there and we'll place another there. Now, what would happen now is you'd get the deviation for the jump pack. So that's a scatter die and a D3. So we'll roll for this first sister here. 3 inches that way. Then we'll roll for the second sister. 1 inch slightly diagonally forward. Now, obviously, that's broken their unit coherency, so that's something they're going to have to worry about. But it has brought them to within close range for their bolt pistols against these two orcs. And that would be their sort of remaining moves. That would take place in the remaining moves part of the movement phase. Now, if we go back and move them as if they're going to charge, so declare charges. The sisters are declaring a charge against those two orcs. Compulsory moves, get that out of the way. Move charges. First sister, 18 inches into contact. We still roll for the scatter. Okay, that's a hit for a jump pack, so that means she lands exactly where she wanted to. The second sister jumps into contact with that orc, and that's a hit, so she lands exactly where she wanted to. Now, if they had deviated any amount, let's roll again, say for this sister, and she had gone 3 inches that way where she landed, that's okay, because it's a charge move, she gets 4 inches to get back into hand-to-hand combat. So there's very little chance of deviating and not getting into hand-to-hand combat. As the maximum you can deviate is D3, but you get 4 inches of sort of follow-up, if you like, move to get into combat. The reason you would still roll is because if she had deviated 3 inches this way and landed behind the orc, you could roll I think it's a strength 3 hit for landing on rough terrain. So there is a chance that you could lose some models by landing in rough terrain. Okay, so while we're on the subject of jump packs, let's go through jump packs and vehicles. So let's just say these two sisters are travelling in that Rhino. Now, they cannot jump from directly inside the Rhino, but they can disembark anywhere within 2 inches of the sides or rear and then jump from there in the same phase. So what you could do is have the Rhino move up its 10 inches or whatever, because you don't want to disembark going over 10 because you'll risk taking a hit. So it comes to there. Then it's the sisters' movement, remaining moves to turn. They come out 2 inches. Then they can jump 18 inches with their jump pack. So you can actually cover quite a large distance. Now, the one thing you can't do, though, is disembark and then charge, because the order of movement states that you can't. You have to declare charges, then you have to do compulsory moves, then you have to move charges. Now, if the Rhino is back here, then you can't move charges. They'd have to move from where the Rhino started. One of the contradictions in the Q&A is that the Rhino can be part of the charge. So, for instance, if we put these orcs here and we say the sisters inside the Rhino are going to charge those orcs, then the Rhino moves forward, say, 10 inches. The sisters then charge directly from the Rhino 8 inches into hand-to-hand combat. That would allow you to do that, but there's only one answer in the Q&A that says the vehicle can be part of the charge. Now, of course, you can house rule this with whoever you're playing in the way that you like, but pretty much with the sub-phases of the movement phase and the way it's written, it isn't, I think, I would lean on the side of it not being allowed, because the vehicle's move isn't technically moving a charger, it's a remaining move, it's a normal move. of course, with that being said, just because you can't jump pack out of the Rhino doesn't mean you can't normal charge. So if the Rhino ended its last turn there and it's the beginning and you've got a squad of sisters in there and you say those sisters are declaring a charge against these orcs that just happen to be nice and close, then you can do that in the move charges phase. You've got 8 inches of normal charge from the sisters, because you wouldn't obviously disembark, because disembarking is a remaining move and happens after moving charges. So you'd have to charge directly from the vehicle into the orcs, and that's quite acceptable. But of course they wouldn't be able to use their jump packs like that. Now, with regard to jump packing from open top vehicles, the rules don't really say you can, but I suppose again this is another house rule or by agreement with your opponent as to whether that's a sort of thing you'd like to take part in a game. For instance, if you had these 2 sisters here and something like this is an old gun truck, but we'll just say it's a battle wagon, an orc battle wagon, then these storm boys, it's an open top vehicle. What's to say they couldn't jump pack directly out of the vehicle into the sisters? Again, it doesn't state, it purely states that you cannot jump pack out of vehicles. So I suppose it's up to you and your opponent. Okay, so next up, swooping hawks and gargoyles. They both operate in very similar ways. I think there's a little bit of difference to their movement, the distance they can move on the battlefield, but they can both fly high. And they can both use their flying to charge, either from flying high or on the battlefield. So, for instance, these 3 swooping hawks, if they declared a charge in the declare charges phase, compulsory movements, and then we have move charges. Even if they were flying or using their normal sort of movement, they would have to engage the orcs here, because they are the closest unengaged targets. Now, if they were in hand-to-hand combat previously, their flying ability, those and gargoyles, allow them to remove themselves either with a normal move. Actually, no, I think it's flying high only, and it allows them to come out of hand-to-hand combat without penalty, without being broken or taking the free hits, as they just basically take off straight up and avoid any more combat. So that's a real bonus for gargoyles and swooping hawks. Now, once they're flying high, take them off the table. When they come back down, any target they choose becomes the closest unengaged target. So they can basically split all over the board. So let's put these orcs down here like this. So they come back down from flying high and they want to take out this support weapon, which is a standard sort of swooping hawk tactic. Come down here, you can engage these 2. Now also, we could also put the 3rd in with the other Gretchen, but also because hand-to-hand combat, in hand-to-hand combat you don't have to worry about unit coherency, we could drop this one all the way down here if we wanted. And as long as hand-to-hand combat ensued, then they wouldn't have to worry about unit coherency, as long as they reformed once they were out of hand-to-hand combat. Okay, so on to leaping and bounding, and we'll cover the 3 models that I mentioned earlier. An Exarch with the leap ability, Flamers of Zench, and Hormagaunts with their leap. So first up, the, say, Banshee Exarch here. So her normal movement is 5, at the end of which she could leap, if she wanted, another 4 inches, taking it to 9. Or she could run, doubling her movement to 10, adding another 4 to leap to there, or charge with the leap, which again would bring it to the 14, but not allow her to jump over enemy models to charge another. So for instance, if she was here, orc was there, and she charged, it doesn't matter how much the leap would give her or how far she would move, she'd have to engage that closest unengaged model. On the other hand, if she was just doing a normal move and not charging, she could move her 5, leap her 4, and end up on the other side of the orc like that. So I suppose there's some instances in which it could be handy. Now, it does seem to indicate in the description that the leap comes at the end of the normal move, so 5 or 10, if it's a run or a charge. So, not as handy as it could be, being able to use the leap at somewhere in that movement. Definitely not for charging, because you have to engage the closest unengaged model, but for running or normal movement, it seems to indicate that you can do those things with the leap at the end, although it doesn't explicitly state that. So again, you can always sort of work that out amongst yourselves, whether that leap should take place anywhere within the Banshee, the Exarch's movement. Now, onto the Hormagaunts. These seem to indicate that it could use its 6-inch. This has a 6-inch instead of 4. It's 6-inch leap, maybe anywhere in its movement. It kind of implies that any terrain covered with that leap, you know, you're not affected by the half movement or the quarter movement or whatever. So I think that would be a lot handier. The leap takes them up to their normal move is 6, 12 for a run. And then it would be another 6 inches up to 18 for a leap. And I think the leap can technically take place anywhere in the movement to cover that man-size obstacle or model. Again, though, if it's a charge, even with the leap, you cannot bypass the closest unengaged model. It has to engage. Now, this other one, on the other hand, could technically move, do its leap, and carry on because that model's engaged. Lastly, but not least, the Tzeentch flamers of Tzeentch. Now, their description says that they have a bounding movement. They move 9, so they would run or charge 18, and it says they can move over any obstacles or intervening models without penalty. It said any. So, from what I can tell, say 18, let's go here. According to the letter of the rules, providing they're not charging, of course, they could literally just do this and end up there, which is pretty impressive. It's just a shame that the actual models are pretty useless on the battlefield. Of course, if they were charging as before, they have to engage the closest unengaged model, so they would end up there. But for normal movement, it says they can clear any models or any obstacles such as this. So whether that's done in bounds like that, perhaps, or whether it's just done as one big movement, I suppose it doesn't really matter in terms of game effects. They can just end up there. Or for instance, over this building here, they could literally leap over that. It doesn't say there's any restrictions for the height of the building, just any obstacle without penalty. Okay, then just to finish up with just vehicle movement. As previously stated, vehicles move the same time as any other model. If they're out of control, they move in the compulsory movement. If not, they move when it's remaining moves. There's slow, combat and fast speed, and it differs depending on the vehicle. It just so happens that the slow speed for both the bike and this battle wagon, although it's a gun truck, but we say it's a battle wagon, is 8 inches. So the slow speed is exactly the same. The difference, of course, as previously stated, the bike could accelerate 2 bands up to combat speed. So let's say both vehicles are stationary. The battle wagon accelerates to slow speed, 8 inches. That'll bring it to there. The bike, on the other hand, is going to accelerate 2 bands up to combat speed, which is 12 inches for the bike, which brings it up to here. Now, again, if they want to turn, the battle wagon would get as many turns as it wanted at slow speed. Anywhere within that 8 inches of movement, it could have turned any amount. Whereas the bike, now going combat speed, would only get 2 of these 45-degree turns, although it can combine them into a single 90, so you can get a good amount of turning at combat speed, or you can separate those turns into 2 separate turns somewhere along its route. Of course, slowing down, the bike can still only drop one band. So if it wanted to slow down next turn, it would have to drop to slow, whereas the battle wagon that was only going slow could go stationary in its next turn. Okay, so let's just quickly cover, as we mentioned before, disembarking and embarking. Now, as the battle wagon is here and it went 8 inches, so it's not going to be hazardous for troops to disembark or embark. Any number of orcs, or the amount that it can hold, if they are within 2 inches of the sides or rear, can embark at the end of their movement. So how we could play that, let's have a look. We've got these orcs here. So they got their normal, say, move or a run perhaps. It doesn't say that you can't do it at the end of a run. So everyone moves as far as they can move, although these guys will make it with their normal move. There. So at the end of their movement phase, they're within 2 inches of the rear or side of the battle wagon, so they can embark. That now, and because the vehicle's moving 10 inches or slower, there's no real risk for that. And that's the same for disembarking. So in the remaining moves phase of the movement phase, let's just say the battle wagon again goes 8 inches, comes to a halt there. The orcs can disembark as a kind of free move, again anywhere along the sides or the rear, as long as it's within 2 inches of the edges, and then they can carry out a normal move or run or anything of that nature. Of course, they can't charge because the vehicle's already done a remaining move, so you have to charge in the charging phase. So they could then carry out a run over here and be on their way into battle. Again, just going over, there is nothing to stop the orcs disembarking with the battle wagon doing a greater speed. So say the battle wagon was doing combat speed, which is about 18 inches. Or is that fast speed? I'll have to check on that. But let's just say the vehicle's doing over 10, so it's doing 14 odd inches there in its movement phase, and the orcs wish to disembark. The rules state that you can interrupt the vehicle's movement anywhere along its travel. So let's go for 14 inches and mark it with that die there. But the orcs want to jump out here. For the purposes of that movement, you could say, well, the vehicle's actually only moved that far, but also the vehicle's accelerating at a speed so it can cover 14 inches. So you would say you would take the full hit as if it was going 14 inches. So the orcs could then disembark quite happily, say 2 inches within the edge. But then they would take an automatic strength hit, according to the table, which I showed earlier, for jumping out of a vehicle moving at that speed. And of course, just to reiterate, the orcs could charge out of that vehicle as well, but of course they can't charge out of the vehicle after its movement, unless the movement was in the turn previous. So for instance, there's the vehicle. There's our two sisters over there. Now the orcs want to charge them. They cannot combine it with the battle wagon's move of 8 to get close and then charge from there, because the battle wagon would have carried out a remaining move, and so the time for chargers to move would have passed. They can attempt to charge directly out of the vehicle, probably fail in this instance. One or two might get in, one maybe, but they can charge directly out of the vehicle, but they can't disembark and then charge, because you can't disembark as part of a charge move. Okay, so that's pretty much the end of this video. I hope it's been helpful and easy to understand. Hopefully it will be of use to someone trying to get into 2nd edition, or someone just wants to refresh the rules. That being said, I'm not the 2nd edition guru, so I do make mistakes. And if there's anything that anyone spots or doesn't agree with, please put it in the comments below, and then we can all get behind it and try and get to the bottom of it. Okay, I think that's about all for now. Thanks for watching. See you next time.